If you want to understand the development of our modern shopping centres in Melbourne, then one place you have to see is right here in the suburb of Forest Hill. I don't normally do the history of larger shopping centres, but in this case I have made an exception because its story is both interesting and important. So join me in today's video where we look at Forest Hill Chase Shopping Centre. If you're new here, my name is Philip Mallis, and I make videos about local history and transport. I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed, because it means I can get more stories about Melbourne and Victoria out to more people. Forest Hill Chase is located on Canterbury Road in the suburb of Forest Hill, about 18 kilometres east of Melbourne CBD. Following European settlement of this land in the 1850s that was formerly inhabited by local Indigenous people, it stayed as mostly farms for quite a long time. Melbourne's suburban sprawl eastwards took some decades to reach the area, really only coming about in the 1950s. This was when the end of the Second World War and the onset of motorcars resulted in a rapid expansion and transformation of how people lived in cities, away from dense, walkable neighbourhoods to more car-based, single-use zoning spread out over a much wider area. As we've discussed before, this brought about a new way of thinking for how people would shop. Many companies both in Australia and around the world looked to the United States for inspiration because they had already started designing cities around cars many years earlier. Basically, the old walkable shopping strips largely built along tram lines were out, and new centralised indoor malls with plenty of car parking and easy road access were in. In Victoria, one of the earliest adopters of this approach was Myer. They ended up building the first large car-based shopping malls in Melbourne, centred around a Myer department store. These included Northland and Southland shopping centres. But some of their plans were not built, including one proposed in the suburb of Burwood, right next to Forest Hill. They bought land here in 1954 for another one of their shopping malls. But 1 year later, in 1955, property developer Paul Feynman wanted to beat them to the punch. So he bought a 3.8 hectare farm in Forest Hill near Myer's site in Burwood. Here he also planned to build a large retail and entertainment precinct to service the rapidly growing suburbs. As a bit of a side note, one of the people he bought the land from, Hilda Looms, was part of the Funkhauser family, one of the most prominent early landowning families of Melbourne's east. Their farmhouse still exists in Balwyn on Belmore Road, seen here in this photo, and it's one of the oldest buildings in the area. Anyway, in 1957, Feynman announced his plans to the world. It included about 70 shops, petrol stations, and free parking for over 1,400 cars, all for the cost of about £6 million, or about $240 million today. This all sounds well and good, but this shopping centre didn't open until 1964, many years later. So why did it take this long? Initially the plans went well. There was great publicity for the owners, with many people excited that such a large and modern shopping centre was coming to this corner of little old Melbourne. Real estate agents plastered mention of the upcoming development on their advertising, making it a selling point in the rapid suburban sprawl marching east. The original design announced by Feynman was an open-air mall along a pedestrian street in the style typical of the US malls that the architects visited. There would be a series of blocks between Canterbury Road and a new thoroughfare called Looms Street, named for Hilda Looms, who we discussed earlier. The areas to the north and the south would be huge surface car parks. It also included a theatre, hotel and residential development. All seemed well so far, and construction tenders were published in December 1958. But then none were awarded, and soon it became clear that there were financial issues for the developers to work through. Following new funding, new architects, and a relaunch of the project in May 1959, the plans went through a redesign. Finally, construction started later in 1959, with the demolition of an orchard and remnant bushland, as well as some timber cottages that were still there. But then another issue came up. Part of the development called for a large hotel with a liquor license, and this sparked the ire of local residents. It became a public dispute with petitions, media articles, and intervention from Nunawading Shire Council. Presumably not wanting to delay the project any longer, the hotel was just dropped from the plans, but it was too late. At the same time, one of the key financial backers of the project went bankrupt, and another was being investigated for fraud. This caused the entire development to stall mid-construction, with only the car park and a few empty buildings to show for all of this time and expense. Now let's return to the site that Myer had bought in Burwood for a minute. You may have realised by now that there is no shopping centre with a Myer in this area of the eastern suburbs. This is because Feynman's plans seem to have scared them off, and they went off to develop Chadstone Shopping Centre instead, which successfully opened in 1960, in stark contrast to the empty parking lot that was Forest Hill. So after years of lying dormant and playing host to some grazing cows for a while, new investors became involved in Forest Hill. They redesigned the development, changing the exterior of buildings and reorganising the retail floor space ratios. Construction resumed soon afterwards, and anticipation began to grow once again. Finally, on Tuesday the 30th of June 1964, Forest Hill Shopping Centre opened for business. This official opening was a huge event. Graham Kennedy was the star of the show, and thousands of people flocked to the long-anticipated centre. But, as you may have already seen from this picture, it had a slightly different name. This was Forest Hills Shopping Centre, with an S added. This actually caused a lot of local controversy at the time, but was deliberately done by the architects to directly connect it to a part of New York City in the United States, called Forest Hills, because they thought this would make it sound modern and trendy. This US connection was even more obvious in one of the other names considered during planning, which was the Stonestown Drive-In Shopping Centre. This was named for Stonestown Galleria in San Francisco, a car-centric shopping mall built in 1952, which was one of the design inspirations for this and other shopping centres in Melbourne. I have to admit, when I saw this photo here of Stonestown, I was shocked at how similar this looks to many of our larger shopping centres built or refurbished at this time, like Eastland or even Chadstone. Some of the shops in the early days of Forest Hill were a Safeway supermarket, Moore's department store, Lindsay's department store, and McEwen's hardware store. Following the opening, the rest of the master plan was built in stages. More shops were added, and it continued to grow into 1965. At the front of the shops was the iconic Rocket Playground, built in April 1965. This metal tower in the shape of a rocket ship was one of several across Victoria and Australia. This was part of a brief but important period in architecture and design called Guji. It came out in the 1950s, 60s and 70s and reflected the great interest in space travel and the promise of new futuristic technology of the time. This one was at Forest Hill until 1987, when it was moved to Sindel South Primary School to make way for renovations. It's since become a kind of mascot for the school, with their newsletter called The Rocket. There are still some rocket playgrounds around Australia, and if you want to know more about this, check out my more detailed blog post linked in the description below. Over the next decade, the centre continued to eat up the surrounding neighbourhood. While the retail floor area stayed more or less the same initially, more properties were acquired by the developers to expand their already enormous surface car parks. Then, as more suburbs expanded into the east and Forest Hill became busier, further expansion was planned. By 1976, new multi-storey parking had been built at its frontage with Canterbury Road, with the rear one becoming a new multi-storey enclosed retail building. By 1981, almost all of the houses on the street that today is one of the main car park entrances off Canterbury Road, just next to the petrol station, had been demolished to make way for the ever-expanding car park. Then in 1987, the largest redevelopment and refurbishment in the centre's history was completed. This was also the one that made the centre iconic in the way that I personally remember, and put in place many of the structures that remain. Basically, this meant tearing up the original semi-outdoor, largely single-storey pedestrian malls, and replacing it with a single multi-storey indoor shopping mall. Still more houses were acquired and demolished for yet more car parking, and the new access road around the west and south of the shopping centre, today called Pacific Way. Some of the streets directly south and west, such as Flora Grove and Bennett Street, had part of their street closed off to cars to protect the residents there from the large increases in car traffic. Although many of the side streets had been closed off, Marnie's Road, running north-south alongside the shopping centre, saw an increase in traffic. Some residents here protested against these increases caused by the expansion and the new car parks, and formed the Forest Hill Action Group and protested throughout the late 1980s, even staging a protest march down the road. But it was the new indoor building that many will remember. The large atrium featuring the glass lift, the skylights above the corridors, and the indoor fountain were all built at this time. Its design was a classic of the period, similar to other shopping centres refurbished in this era. Over the next few decades, it continued to change. Car parking continued to be added, new cinemas were opened, and the bowling alley was added. The latest two refurbishments in 2017 and 2025 have brought it up to its present day look and feel, with a more modern food court and changes to the building interior. The iconic glass lift was also removed and replaced with a larger, more modern one in 2013. Today it's known as Forest Hill Chase, the Chase being added in 1989 during the major redevelopment at the time. There are some other shopping centres around Australia with this name, like Chatswood in Sydney, but I haven't been able to confirm exactly where this comes from. My theory is based on the fact that chase can mean a groove, which comes from the French chat, which means an enclosure or an enclosed space. Given that the name was added when Forest Hill changed from an outdoor to an indoor or enclosed shopping centre, this may be why. This is just my theory though, so if you know the reason, please let me know in the comments. The only traces today of the original open-air pedestrian mall are these three shops on Marnies Road, right next to the pedestrian crossing. These give you a taste of what the rest of the shops would have looked like. And now we come to the shops that are outside the main complex, on the east side of Marnies Road. Now, I had always assumed that these were developed separately, even maybe before the shopping centre, but these were actually also part of the original development. Many of the original buildings remain, including this one at the very north end of the intersection with Canterbury Road. It was initially the Crystal Forest restaurant, later becoming a Cantonese restaurant. It's still there today, operating as a late-night Chinese restaurant on the ground floor with a karaoke bar above. Further up the street, the stepped-down pitched roof designs are a classic indication of the architectural style of the period. At the laneway is 67 Marnies Road. This once housed a cinema which opened in 1968 as the Forest Hill Cinema. Featuring a Hammond organ, it had a colourful history, including as a temporary ice skating rink. Today it sits empty, but the building entrance and exterior are pretty much intact, as it would have looked when it opened. Many of these original buildings remain on Marnies Road, and as we said earlier, the Rocket Playground lives on at Sindel South Primary School. Forest Hill Shopping Centre was ahead of its time. Its origin story helps us understand the pattern of shopping centre development in the eastern suburbs and hopefully brings back a lot of memories for you all. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you enjoyed it and let me know in the comments of your memories of Forest Hill. If you'd like to become a supporter of the channel and get access to early video releases and updates, head on over to members.philipmallis.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.